Wow, you are calling from many, many, many places. So thank you very much for making the time to join us today for this, to launch this pioneering report. We would like this session to be interactive. So you will be participating in polls. And also, as we go through the conversation, if you have questions, please post them in the chat, and we will pick some of them during the Q&A session to answer them. So the report in question we are talking about today is dubbed Workforce Wanted, Data Talent for Social Impact. This report has been created by data.org and the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation, and in collaboration with Dalberg. The report shows the critical need and the tremendous opportunity for global data talent to enable the social sector to harness the power of data to solve the world's most pressing problems. This report has benefited from a review of 200 data talent initiatives, 70 articles and reports, more than 30 expert interviews with leaders engaged in this work. This global report surveys the current landscape, explores clear pathways for increasing diverse and purpose-driven data talent. The report is launched in the context of COVID-19, which has demonstrated the critical role of data in understanding, appreciating, assessing, and taking informed action to tackle in a timely manner the challenges caused by the global pandemic. Above all, we all understand that an essential ingredient to the most pressing issues of our time, such as health, education, climate, poverty, and inequality, is to ensure we have the right data at the right time to know what works and what doesn't work and why. Having adequate data professionals is therefore a must. Before we go any further, I invite you to look at this video.
Social impact organizations are at the forefront of serving their communities, protecting the planet, and improving lives. But they lag in one critical area: using the power of data to meet their mission. Today, we stand at the edge of possibility. We can strengthen the social sector by breaking down systemic barriers to create an inclusive pool of purpose-driven data professionals. On behalf of data.org and the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation, I am proud to announce Workforce Wanted, Data Talent for Social Impact. This first-of-its-kind report reveals the scale of the global opportunity and explores 4 pathways to increase data talent. No one can do this work alone, but together, we can build a diverse workforce of purpose-driven data professionals advancing social impact. Join us. Download the report today.
Thank you. Yes, the report is live and you can download it. You have a link on the chat through which you can download this report. Let me now invite my 2 panelists. Claudia Youth, Vice President of Data and Society at the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation, and Ginger Zielinski, Senior Advisor at data.org. I would invite them to make a quick introduction and walk you through the objectives that this report aims to cover. Claudia, please.
Thanks so much, Mamadou. It's so great to be here with you, with everybody around the globe, and with my co-collaborator, Ginger Zielinski. I'm super excited talking with all of you about the findings of the report and hear your comments on the recommendations as well. The questions of staffing data work come up all the time in my work at the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation. In my role at PJMF, as we call the foundation, we really work alongside nonprofit organizations. We are not only grant makers, but we are collaborators and technical advisors, and serve as a resource for those social impact organizations who are interested in applying data and AI for achieving greater impact. PGMF is one of the few foundations who really has a singular focus on data and AI to create more equitable and thriving societies. And questions of retention and hiring come up all the time in my work, which really triggered my motivation for this report. Ginger, what about you?
Hello and good day, everyone. Thank you, Claudia. I'm Ginger Zielinski, and I'm at data.org. And as you may know, data.org is a platform for partnerships to build the field of data science. And as we explored in our 2-year history, how best to support social impact organizations in unlocking the power of data and data science, talent continued to come up as an underpinning of each challenge we sought to solve. And having been a social impact practitioner for many years, I have both engaged with technical assistance work, hired both amazing talent and the wrong talent, and so understand very acutely the opportunity in front of social impact organizations and the sector overall, as well as the challenges ahead. And so through this report, our goal was really to articulate and formulate and better understand where the field is today and the scale of the opportunity ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Claudia and Ginger. That's very right. As the report say, and from your own conversation, we see this, maybe other sectors may have not solved the problem, but they are well in advance in using data talent and using data to generate insights and guide their action. When it comes to the social sector, this is a little bit more of a challenge. But the report gives us 4 possible pathways. And in the spirit of interactivity, I will invite you to take the following poll. What do you think among the 4 pathways actually will be help us, is best positioned to contribute to its advancing the issue? A is creating new talent, which is really about exposing students and learners through development of data for social impact use cases. Or option B, existing talents, models of upskilling and reskilling that recognizes the value of existing talent committed to social impact and social impact organizations. Third option is building on transitional talent, giving greater exposure and access to opportunities that allow for more agile flow of talent across sectors. And the fourth option is spurring leadership, enhancing and shaping new models to support design, experimentation, and advancement of data-driven strategies, initiatives, and talent acquisition. So you may choose the one option that you think is better positioned to advance solutions on this issue of data professionals, data talent in the social sector. Let's take a few more seconds to go through the poll. Please remember 4 options: 1 around new talent, existing talent, transitional talent, and leadership are the 4 options. We can now look at the poll results. Oh, it's pretty even, with a little bit more the fourth option, actually really about leadership. Obviously, yes, leadership is in the beginning and at the end of everything, but it feels like through your responses that all four options, it's not one or the other, it's really putting effort on all four with a stronger on leadership. Let me see with my panelists what they do think. Let's start with Claudia. Reflecting on these four pathways to building data talent and organizational capacity in the social sector, can you provide a couple of bright spot examples of this work already happening in the field? Can you also provide insights on how we can continue to fund, scale, and support this work? Claudia?
Absolutely, Mamadou. I think before I go there, I want to provide a few comments on the results of the poll and connect them to the goals of the report, because one of the goals of the report was to really generate visibility into the emerging pool of data talent. And I think the result of the poll shows it's a field in its infancy. There's still so much needed, kind of work, kind of really across all of those four pathways. And I feel everybody who's in the audience agrees with that, because kind of everybody thinks something else is important, or all four are equally important. And I think that's a really interesting outcome. I think I've been 5 years now in this field, and I think we are really seeing a shift from, in the early days, it was about pilots, it was about proving that data is relevant to the nonprofit sector. And I feel we are now shifting. I think probably none of us wants to have the conversation why data is important. I think we are all convinced who we are here, that data capabilities are important for the abilities to kind of use and steward data are important for nonprofit organizations. Now it's really about where's the talent that we need to do that work? How do we implement? How do we go from there? And I think secondly, to kind of also mention the second goal of the report, there is a gap. We kind of have anecdotal evidence about this gap. So we need to understand it more deeply. But I think equally importantly, it's about who is going to fill these roles. And I think that is one other aspect that is truly exciting about the report, that it not only talks about the numbers, but it also talks about the people that we want to see in these roles. We are using the idea framework of inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility to really talk about who can have access, who can access these job opportunities, but also not only from a job opportunity perspective. It's important that we think about diversity of data professionals, because we know that data fairness is better achievable if the people who work on data, clean data, analyze data, really represent the data, the communities and the context where the data originates from. So maybe I'll stop there before I go to the four pathways, and Ginger, hand it over to you, and then maybe speak about the bright lights in a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I chuckled when I saw the poll. Because we agree, all of the different four pathways are essentially important. And that is why I think this undertaking seems so massive to us. So as Claudia mentions, we're early, that this is nascent. However, the social impact sector sees the potential to use data and data science more effectively to tackle literally the hardest problems in the globe. The question is, how do we use this very powerful tool responsibly? And in order to do that, I was in a conversation about building trust in AI just last week. We have a responsibility to embed that trust. But the truth is, we all have bias. And in order for us to combat those natural biases that we may have, whether they be malicious or not, we have to have more representation in who is behind the keyboard and who is building and using and applying this very powerful, potentially beneficial, also potentially harmful tool. And so going into the report saying we have an opportunity to be proactive in how we change, how we build this workforce was extremely exciting and daunting, giving them the dimensionality of thinking about the scale of the opportunity. So the third goal of the report that Claudia and I were committed, along with our teams, to achieving was really to articulate recommendations. And when we thought about recommendations, we realized, given how early we are, given the complexity of whether the problem or the opportunity statement ahead of us, given that we feel that we are already slightly lagging, as Rhonda in the video articulated, it was essential that we thought about how do we coordinate approaches and coordinate recommendations across academia, across philanthropy, across social impact practitioners, and across our Tech for Good partners. And so the third goal of this report was to articulate those recommendations. I can jump into that second question, Mamadou, that you mentioned, and then Claudia, I'll shoot it back to you. We learned so much. There is so many bright spots that the power is really thinking about scale, that the enormity of the gap in terms of thinking that there's an opportunity and the potential to train and unlock 3.5 million jobs for data professionals in developing countries. That is just, it's hard to wrap your head around. But as we think about bright spots, what we learned is the opportunity across those 4 pathways to think about how we apply these tools, data and data science tools, applications with real world evidence was certainly a promising approach. As an example, the University of Chicago runs data clinics where their computer science students actually use data sets in partnership with a philanthropy, and they match with social impact organizations. That's a clear applied training opportunity that builds computer science students understanding and how they can use their skills for issues of social consequence. A second bright spot that we've seen is long-term technical assistance partnerships that we really heard loud and clear across both the literature and the interviews, that the short-term blips, 4-week technical assistance can be actually quite, it can have unintended consequences. However, long-term investments where we're building teams and we're training teams on specific problem statements with specific data sets creates an opportunity to really build the skills within social impact organizations and build the understanding from those technical assistance partners. And I'll just, one last statement and I'll pass it to you, Claudia. The power of being interdisciplinary in using data and data science skills to solve social challenges cannot be understated. That our subject matter experts, many of you on the line today, are doing amazing, powerful work and are experts in your field. The question is, how do we support more people in building this new technology and this new way of thinking, this new way of working in ways to better meet our mission? And that Venn diagram of where that technical expertise meets that subject matter expertise, and there's a humility and an understanding of how to work together, creates the potential to really unlock how we think about the most important problems of our day. So I will pause there and pass it to you, Claudia.
Thank you, Ginger. Maybe to add a few bright spots to what Ginger already mentioned. So, and going through the 4 pathways, doing that. So looking at new talent, I think, Ginger, you already very eloquently spoke to how important exposure to nonprofit work nonprofit data issues is and aims. The African Institute for Mathematical Sciences in Africa is another example who I think is doing that well. Then there is the second category that we are talking about in the report, transitional talent. And there are two organizations maybe worth mentioning, Laboratoria in Latin America, as well as Andela in Rwanda. And I think the piece that's critical there is, I would describe it as employability. So employability for the people who come into these trainings. So it's not just a training, then it's over and where to go next, but it's really about organizations that are at the core of ecosystems that have develop long-standing networks with employers who understand what employers need, so that the people who go through the training, who are women or representative of historically excluded communities, can really be connected to job opportunities. But on the other hand, the employer also knows that they get people who, and have the trust that they get people who will be really able to advance the work. I think the category that I feel is very important is the one of existing talent. I think there's a lot of challenges around attracting talent to the social sector and retaining talent there. And so the people who are already working for nonprofit organizations, they already have made a choice. They are already mission driven. And so what are the kind of the possibilities of offering growth opportunities, professional development opportunities for these employees? And there are a couple of organizations in the report, such as Harambe or the One Acre Fund, who do this well. And I see there's a lot of kind of chat or kind of focus in the chat on leadership. And I think that is true, that is critical. If people at the top are not committed to this change process that becoming a data-driven organization means, it's very hard for the practitioners to move this along. And so DASRA, for example, has a leadership program. I think there's a lot of opportunity beyond dedicated leadership programs to really build data capabilities into leadership programs as one among other skills. So those are some of the things, and there are many more in the report. Check it out.
Thank you. Thank you both, Claudia and Ginger. Those are really very important points. I will retain a couple of things that you mentioned. You know, the conversation is really not about whether it is important, you know, to use data, to have data talent, but it's really about how do we build that? How do we build it at scale? And you've provided a number of areas where we are seeing some movement, but very important is really committed leadership. And coming to that building at scale, the report actually mentions that there are opportunities to shape and develop 3.5 million data professionals focused on social impact in developing countries over the next 10 years. How is the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation planning to contribute to the development of such pool of data professionals? Claudia.
Thank you, Mamadou. Obviously, as I said at the beginning, the work with data and AI is our singular focus. And so this is clearly a topic that is very relevant for us, both in the combination of advancing data talent in the nonprofit sector, but also what is the makeup of that, of the personnel, and how is it reflecting the communities where the data originates from, and underserved populations more broadly. What the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation has done and will continue to do is investment in workforce development in the tech industry. So in the last year, in 21, we invested 10 million, over 10 million in workforce development, for example, in organizations such as Akira Chicks, which is an organization focused on young women in STEM based in Nairobi. And the program now supports women in 3 or 4 East African countries. We have similar efforts in the US and are kind of working on broadening that further globally. That is clearly a focus on the individual providing access to employment opportunities in this growing space. I think my own team does work that is really reflective of also some of the findings of the report. We focus really on working with teams and working with organizations. How can we build the capacity as we are making grants and as we are selecting projects? And I said earlier, we are working alongside these nonprofit organizations. And the alongside, I think, is the critical word here. It's not, we are not doing it for them. We are lending a helping hand, but in the end, what we want these organizations to be able to do is to kind of move this forward themselves. I think another thing that we are doing is, and we'll select another set of organizations later in the year, is what I call data anchor institutions. So there are institutions in a lot of disciplines that are aggregating data, providing open data sets, data tooling for a lot of other nonprofits. So for example, this Monday, we spoke with a human rights organization, and they are providing 400 other human rights organizations with data sets, with data tooling. And I think there is an opportunity to really strengthen those data anchor institutions, and because they know what's relevant for the next tier of the 400 organizations. What do they need in terms of building their capacity to utilize the data that is really relevant for their mission and the work that they want to do? I'll stop there and see what are other ideas.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing not only what you will be doing, the plans, but also what you are already currently doing in this field. Let me turn to Ginger. Ginger, what was the biggest surprise or shock through this report to you? And how does that inform action or future action for you?
Well, this would be the opportune moment to, again, just thank my partner in crime, Claudia, and Dahlberg, and the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth for allowing us to engage in this learning and this exploration. Because of the multidimensionality, thinking and learning about the trends within labor economics, thinking and learning about the issues of both supply and demand within the social impact sector, thinking about how best to support organizations and our sector as a whole move from individual projects to organizational capacity to then thinking about systems thinking, right? Like data and data science allow us to change how we work. And therefore, we have to change how we work. And our goal is also then to change who is doing that work in some ways, right? To ensure an inclusive workforce, to ensure that diverse perspectives from communities we seek to support are engaged and using data and analytics to solve these problems. I will say I was absolutely surprised by how early we are, by how much information and knowledge we still need to uncover and gain and aggregate and share and learn from. When we went digging around, both size of the opportunity, size of the labor market within our social impact sector. And I think this is exemplar of the fact that we have not yet used data and data science to our fullest potential. And I don't want to be a downer. There are many bright spots. It's just that the opportunity is so massive. So that's why we have to continue to invest in dissecting the complexity of this opportunity statement and learning from each other. So both in terms of, I think, the nascency of the field, and then secondly, I think that the biggest opportunity I saw, and it's articulated in our recommendations, is the power to learn from each other and coordinate. Technology is moving so fast, the skills that required continue to evolve at such a rate that we owe it to ourselves and our colleagues who are so passionate about solving the problems that we're charged with. It's our responsibility to make sure that we're sharing and learning among each other and building those ecosystems. How can we use shared infrastructure differently? How can we unlock, as Claudia mentions, a data set so that every organization doesn't need it, but rather how do we centralize? And so that's, I think, also where we see great opportunity in what we uncovered.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The report offers also a broad range of voices with different experiences. And one of them really did stand out to me. And I want to bring it here. It's this is a quote from Shezia Lilani, Country Director of Amani Institute. And here's what she says. Once you go from junior towards mid to senior management, the data, the DEI statistics shift drastically. And it's difficult to attract a diverse leadership cohort when most organization leaders are not diverse. Claudia, can you talk a little bit about what this report finds and ways that these principles can be enhanced in the talent pipeline?
Not surprisingly, and building on what Ginger just said, we have few definitive data points, but I think what we are finding is that when we look at diversity and whatever category we are using, I think that diversity standards are definitely not being met. I think it's dismal in the private sector, and it's not much better in the nonprofit sector right now. For example, when we look at gender diversity. And so how can we change that? What are the mechanisms for that? For me, I would use the two words intentionally and holistically to describe that. And maybe I'll start with holistically. And I think this is exactly building on the quote that you brought to us, Mamadou, which is that it's not sufficient to hire a junior analyst who might bring a different set of lived experiences to an organization or to a data team. I think it's really about looking across who's on the board, who is the senior leadership. I think it's really about who, kind of the broad range, who's selecting people for fellowships, who's selecting people for placements in various training mechanisms, and to make sure that we are really not focusing just on kind of the early stages of hiring or the kind of the early stages of a career. That's the holistic for me. The intentional is about that. I think often when we are in these conversations, whether it's in the private sector or in the nonprofit sector, people saying, well, I can't find these people. So I did a search and kind of in building the pipeline. And I think that is not good enough. I think we need to set ourselves clear goals, and we really need to do the outreach. And alongside that, we need to think about what else might people need that would equip them to move into these roles. And I think that in the case of women, is that additional childcare? Is that, kind of is it additional support for maybe to getting to work? I think, thinking about these aspects, I think is critical for funders to ask, what is the makeup of your team? How are you thinking about these topics? To kind of really spark for organizations that this is a focus and that we really want to affect change in these areas. Those are some of my kind of ideas.
No, thank you. Thank you for those ideas. There is another one that also I found very interesting, and this is for Ginger. In the report, you state that there is a significant untapped potential to shape the field of data more broadly to tackle the world's most pressing issues in developing contexts. First, can you please provide background on the term developing context? Next, can you speak to the potential of the opportunity? What are some of the challenges to overcome to realize this potential? Ginger.
Sure, and we started out this report with a very specific focus on, this isn't just about building a workforce of data professionals. It's about putting and being deliberate about making sure that it is diverse, and diverse across a variety of different characteristics, whether that's gender, race, caste, socioeconomic status, right? That if we actually want to build equity-centered data science solutions, we have to be proactive in focusing on building an inclusive and diverse workforce. So we started out using the term developing countries. However, it's important for us to note that, for example, here in the United States, there are plenty of communities that cannot yet as easily or as readily access training to skills required to unlock the power of data and data science. So that's where we started to really think about developing context, that it's not just about where the country sits, but it's about the context of the community. And that leads us then to think about really one of the concepts that held so close to us was accessibility. So whether we want to talk about the digital divide, that the power of data and data science cannot be unlocked if you cannot access the internet, right? So how do we think about ensuring, and again, this gets to the complexity of the ecosystem in which we're exploring, is we have to think about internet access and accessibility if we want to talk about unlocking power, the power of these tools, as well as the talent that can most effectively use them to solve problems that they most importantly understand. And that gets to the concept of co-creation. I was fortunate enough to do some other work in partnership with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. We wrote a report called Recode, and how do you build equity-centered community data ecosystems? And my colleagues have heard me say this. I went in thinking that we were going to go talk about data infrastructure and data standards, and we talked, and the communities were loud and clear. We talked about trust and power. And so as we think about building an inclusive and diverse workforce, and we are interested in using data and data science to tackle extremely important social problems across communities across the globe, we have to think about trust and power and embed a more equitable system within our codes and our algorithms, and in order to best solve the problem, or else we will perpetuate using this powerful tool similar consequences in which we're trying to deal with right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, just like I asked Claudia, this report, really pioneering report, brings so many insights, but also makes very clear recommendations. How is data.org planning to bring on board partners and key stakeholders and put in place mechanisms for the implementation of the recommendations of the report?
Yes. Well, first and foremost, to train this next generation of talent, to develop mechanisms to support the upskilling within organizations, to build more clear and porous pipelines between the technology sector and our social impact sector, and to support leaders in driving this transformation, we have to get real about the capital required. Having led a social impact organization, I know that it is really hard to say, I'm not going to serve people with this money because I'm going to invest in my digital infrastructure. That is a very hard delta to make that decision, even though I know that there's potential positive impact down the line. I think we all have to get real about the level of capital required, and data.org is very interested in supporting the aggregation of that capital in order to distribute and then better coordinate solutions. And I think that coordination, data.org is a platform for partnership. So we want to learn from those bright spots and share and amplify the success, so that if there's a bright spot in Indonesia, let's learn from it in Cairo. Now, will there be differences? Yes. Will there be similarities that we can learn from? Absolutely. And so I think that level of coordination is a second component that data.org is excited to play that role as we think about the mechanisms for this training and upskilling and leadership support.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Ginger and Claudia, for this excellent report, but also you're walking us through many of the nuggets in the report. So maybe it's time now to bring back the audience, and I will do so through a poll. I think that you have all been actually inspired by what you have heard, and the solutions and recommendations uncovered requires all of us to act in concert. So I would like to ask, what action item are you most likely to take after this webinar? We have, again, 4 options. The first one is to implement data training courses and curricula specifically tailored to social impact, academia, in-house or otherwise. Option B, build internal pipeline trajectories for data professionals on an organizational level. Or C, fund programs that foster and use data skill sets for social impact. And the last 4, not least, is to build new organizational models that support design, experimentation, and advancement of data-driven strategies. You may choose one of those options. Let's take a few more minutes, seconds for you to share your opinion, the action you will be taking after what you have learned or actually confirmed in your thinking already, through this webinar.
And Mamadou, while people are voting, I'll share a quote that I heard from Amy Sample Ward when I was engaged in the building equitable community data ecosystems. Amy, the CEO of N10, said, "Ginger, it turns out we are the change we're looking for."
Mm-hmm.
And I found that to be so inspiring as you all think about what it is that you will do to build an inclusive and diverse workforce of data professionals focused on social impact.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That was also said by Gandhi, be the change you want to see. So that means that we all need to take, and it came also really through the first poll too, really audience insisted on leadership, how we show the way, how we open the way. So we have already the results of this poll, and we are seeing that most of them are really from the first and the second and the fourth option. So there we go. So people feel like it's better. They would most likely implement data training, but also build new organizational models. It's very interesting that the pipeline of trajectories for data professionals is on the low end. This is at least there are some commitments, and we see where there is opportunity actually to partner, and people will double down. This is perhaps my opportunity now to actually open for a Q&A. And this is, we received a couple of questions. Let me start with one, and I will put it to my panelists, and you can comment both on these questions. The first one says, I want to become a data analyst in the social sector. What education, qualifications, and work experience should I acquire? Does the report comment about any significant barriers to entry?
I can start us off, Ginger, and then you can take it from there. And maybe starting with the second question, which is, does the report speak to barriers to entry? It does. So I don't know where the person is dialing in from who's raising the question, but we are definitely talking about the costs of data trainings being in the range of a typical annual salary, therefore kind of creating barriers for people from kind of lower income populations. And the time needed to kind of entry requirements for these for courses. Those are definitely things that we are talking about in the report. When it comes to concretely, I think we also talk in the report, and I think Ginger talked about this earlier, this question of kind of marrying domain expertise with kind of data science expertise. So if there is an opportunity to take a kind of a major and a minor, kind of whether kind of one is data science, the other one is, let's say, international development or health or environmental science or something like that. I think that sets someone up optimally for success in terms of understanding domains. I think it's also really important practical expertise. I think that's what we are seeing all the time. I was maybe as you surprised by the results of the poll, Mamadou, that the internal pipelines are, kind of received so few votes. I think trainings and curricula are important, but it's really about the practical experience and understanding, working with data, understanding where are biases, and a lot of that also comes with experience and not just a kind of a training, whether it's academic or through other channels. I don't know, anything to add, Ginger?
Yes, you know me, of course. I think two things. First off, in speaking to our academic colleagues, we want to make sure that computer science, data science classes have data sets that are related to public health, related to urban planning, related to climate change, right? That opening up the doorways of opportunity and applicability are extremely important so that we can see how these skills can be applied. Conversely, to our public health professionals who are in academia, learn some basic coding, create opportunities and spaces to build those analytic capabilities and ways of thinking. Again, we're shifting the way in which we work, how we work differently. And so I want to underscore Claudia's point about the subject matter expertise that our social impact professionals have cannot be understated. It is that we know people who know problem statements in local communities. They understand the complexity and the context of those problems. We want to be able to support them in using then this new tool, this new way of working and thinking. So that intersectionality is where there's such great opportunity. So for your data analysts, I'll leave you with fall in love with the problem. And commit yourself and use that passion that you have for social impact. Data and data science is a tool. It's a means to an end. Fall in love with the end.
Yeah, no, that's great. That speaks to what I wanted to ask, which was also the kind of advice you can give to those actually who want to transition. So one more question from the audience is really about whether the topic of communication between different roles and responsibilities for collaborative learning and informing decisions was highlighted as a challenge organizations are facing.
Yes, and indeed, actually, one of the recommendations is moving from focusing on individuals or individual projects to teams, to then organizations and ecosystems. So that kind of pathway, moving from more transactional engagement to more integrated engagement, certainly holds promise, especially as we think about very large data sets and the insights that can be uncovered with proper analysis. So we absolutely grappled with how do we think about the distinction between individuals, teams, and organizations. And we do believe that on a continuum and an evolution, there will be an investment moving from just, we all know, or some of us may know the individual data analyst who shows up at their new job and the data is messy and the infrastructure is weak and they have no one to talk to, but the leader at that organization may know the potential is there, right? So how do we support and build teams, again, interdisciplinary in nature, that can then build a shared strategy to make that change over time, and then again use that change to think about how we are supporting a more of an ecosystem approach. So that was certainly one of the recommendations, but Claudia, pass it to you for additional insight.
Second, everything you said, Ginger, and just want to emphasize again the role of leaders who are critically mentioned in the report. And it's really about, we are moving from maybe projects, data projects, one-off data projects, insular in nature, or kind of a maybe more siloed data analysis unit, to really what are data-driven organizations in the social impact sector, and that requires definitely that team approach, but also that matrix approach to really make sure that these tools are being used for the benefit of kind of improved program design, program evaluation, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Oh, thank you. And the last question that I want to bring also again from the audience is this one. The social sector is a clear example where government, not-profit partnership, and interrelationship is the basis for how most things happen. How might we think about the talent ecosystem in this conversation when we throw government into the mix? Thoughts? Any?
Starting with maybe with the most obvious one, which is that governments clearly, it's their role to kind of shape the educational system, and that is clearly critical to the questions that we have discussed today. I think more broadly, I think it's also about availability of open data sets. So often governments provide data sets that are then being used by nonprofit organizations, and vice versa in some ways. I mean, there are definitely also nonprofit organizations who assist governments in developing models to guide public activities. So I think there's a lot of synergies, symbiotic relationships in this case. But I think also want to use the opportunity to highlight the role of the private sector. I mean, there are a lot of kind of volunteer programs, for example, where gaps in nonprofit staffing is being maybe filled temporarily by private sector volunteers. Those things can work if they are set up for a longer term, if there are clear responsibilities, and if the nonprofit sector draws on specialized skills that the private sector might have, while developing internal capacity and protecting the institutional memory as well. But those are some thoughts as well.
Ginger, in 30 seconds, anything to add?
Yes, I would just add that as we continue to unlock the potential of this tool and this way of working, way of thinking, we have an opportunity to reimagine how we align on shared goals. And aligning on those shared goals creates the space and place for what will government do, what will the social impact sector do, what will technology do, what will academia do. And in doing so, I think that that's how we can really drive forward and create systemic change. That all of the, whether we want to talk about climate change or let's take climate change, everyone needs to act in concert. And, you know, only by dissecting and peeling back the onions using data science do we uncover the insights that then drive us towards the solution. And that we have to do that together, and government has to be at the table. And we all need to build the skills and capabilities to think a little bit differently.
Oh, thank you both. Maybe in one sentence, what is the closing call to action from each of you? In one sentence. Claudia, do you want to start again?
Be intentional about who you hire and who you promote and who you offer growth opportunities, not only when it comes to data, but overall in nonprofit organizations.
Thank you. Be intentional about your talent. Ginger?
Be curious about what the data has to really tell you, and be agile enough to evolve, and be opportunistic enough to take advantage and drive this change forward. We are excited. There is a lot of momentum, and we can't wait to work alongside of all of you to drive this transformation.
Thank you both. And I think that audience will agree with me that this has been really a very insightful session. And my call, and I want to really thank you. I think that they will join me also in thanking you for this conversation and the insights. My call to action is gonna be to ask everyone not only to download this pioneering report, but also to share it as widely as possible in your networks. This is an emerging really area of learning, and I think that there will be more work done on it. But most importantly, we all agree that this is just the beginning. But we know what the problem is. You know, we need this talent, and as was said many and many times, this requires intentionality, investment, long-term commitment to that. And this is something that everyone has a role to play in. So we look forward to all of us acting on this so that the social sector can really be more impactful and more precise in targeting and creating the impact they intend to. Thank you very much to everyone. Thanks to the panelists. Thanks to the audience, and yes, read the report. Share it. Thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mamadou.
So
Thank you, everyone who joined. Thanks, Ginger.